Well, welcome back. This is our second to last series on teaching empathy for our kids. It's been really a lot of fun going through, and we really appreciate you joining us as part of this series. Once again, we're using our familiar book, Unselfie by Michelle Borba. And so if you don't have the book at this point, definitely check it out for sure. So here's my story for today. I was thinking about this as we kind of wrap up the series next week. And I was thinking about a month ago, we had a high school student contact us, which is kind of neat. From time to time, we have different people from the community that regularly contact us about things that they're passionate about and they want to partner. But this high school student came to us and she had recently gotten a local grant, and she had grown up with a brother on the autism spectrum. And as part of the local grant, she decided, having watched her brother over the years struggle with anxiety and sensory issues, that she really wanted to put together a number of fidget packets for our clients here. And so of course, I was excited to kind of receive the email and to make contact with her and kind of got things set up. And so she came in really excitedly one day, and she probably had 20, 25 at least, if not more, fidget packets, and really had taken a lot of time to organize all sorts of different toys and just kind of make the bags colorful. And we sat down and we talked a little bit. And I thought one of the really neat things, even beyond the effort and just her enthusiasm, was the fact that she, in the midst of her high school years, she could be spending time doing lots of other things, had decided to spend her time really creating these packets, and not just for us, but for one other organization in town. And I thought, you know what, that's incredible intentionality. That not only did she obviously feel really empathetic for those who struggled with similar issues, but she took that empathy, and as we were talking about last week, she really translated into sustained action. And in doing so, it was so neat. You could see the enthusiasm, the excitement on her face. In fact, her mom was here with her, and we asked if we could have their permission to put them on our Facebook and kind of our social media pages. And her eyes lit up, and she thought, "Oh, that sounds fantastic." And so I relate that story just to say, as we kind of come into the end of our series, that one of the things I think is really important is that empathy can be fun. Like, it really can be fun, and we kind of often forget that, maybe as parents and as teachers and other professionals, that in the midst of all the great advantages for other people and for ourselves, like, it can just be fun. And this particular day, she was clearly having fun, right, in lots of ways. And so as we begin kind of our episode today, I think let's remember that anything that's fun and enjoyable in different ways is always going to kind of create more of a desire to do it again and again. So with that, I'm going to let it over to Jamie to kind of talk today about the beginning of our 7 creative ways to give the empathy advantage.
Well, I love that story. I have those fidgets in my office, and I have plenty of friends who explore my bag on the regular, find out what's new in there. I had no idea that that's where those came from, though. So I love that story.
Yep.
And I think it kind of speaks to this idea that this first creative way, this kind of culmination epilogue of the chapter or of the book, is really like the nitty gritty. We've talked about all the reasons why. We've talked about what they're called, emotion identification and moral identity and courage and all of these things. But at the end of the day, we have to know how to do it, and in a way that, again, makes it fun, not like, oh, I'm telling you to do this because you have to. Because again, that's not what empathy is. It's this inner desire to put, yourself in somebody else's position and feel with them. And the first thing that she really talks about is these real essential ways of meaningful connection that is in line with your child's needs and what they want to do. So seeking out the opportunities for your child to find what's passionate for them. They have a sibling with a disability, or they see they have, sports equipment and other kids don't have the same equipment, or, they see kids at, religious services who don't have boots for winter, or whatever the thing is that really sparks that curiosity and that desire to act in your children, like meaningful change that is important to them. You can be creative in all of those ways. I think it's really wonderful that this young woman had money and a grant from the community, but I also want, to highlight that a lot of the things we are going to talk about today don't require any financial investment. And I know if you think about like time is money, they do require time, they do require effort, but there's one less barrier, right? If we can kind of say, at least you don't have to put in $1,000 to buy your kid a bunch of fidgets, that really can break down those barriers and realize there's a lot you can do. I know Jim's talked a lot about, the capitalizing on the little moments that we kind of already have in our day, but then really meeting your kids where they're at and taking advantage of those moments in a way that's meaningful to them.
I think one of the things that kind of spur off what you said, Jamie, that's really key is that when we are opportunistic as parents, it's not only much easier for us to improve or increase the empathy with our kids, but it actually is probably more even effective. So when we think about our kids and their curiosities, right? Things that they notice in their environment, maybe they notice someone on the corner asking for money, or maybe they notice that, again, certain kids at school seem to be struggling with areas that they're not struggling with. It's natural for kids to bring that to us, right? It's natural for them to kind of make comments, especially at a younger age when they don't have a reason to censor, and they don't have a reason to like, think, I don't really want to say something or I shouldn't say something. And that's exactly the point where I think that we as parents in an opportunistic way could say, oh, you know what? So yeah, let's talk about that person standing there and why they might be standing there on the corner, what's going on. And, have one exploring that conversation, but then in exploring that conversation, say, what would be a great thing for us to do? And not just for that person, but for someone else. Here's some things that we could probably really do to help them, when it's cold or when they seem to, want something that they don't have or need something there. And so that is the more naturalistic we can do things in our lives as parents, and this goes beyond empathy, but anything, the more naturalistic things come, the more likely actually you're going to see that learning occurs, and it occurs in a way that like sustains itself, right?
Right.
Sometimes we can't be completely naturalistic in the sense that there are just things carved out and there's particular activities that present themselves and they are what they are, right? But I would argue that actually many times throughout our lives as parents, things kind of just organically happen. And if we're ready to see that as an opportunity to increase empathy and responsiveness, then what a great opportunity for learning there, And so anyway, as you said that, I just thought, gosh, curiosity is often the start for many things, but it could be the start for a great empathy advantage here too.
I think that's really the case. And I think, one of the other pieces, so number one was kind of that meaningful match to child's needs. But one of the other things that is on this list is this idea of breaking down barriers. And that's kind of what I was thinking of as you were saying this. Something about growing up, something about becoming older. There's a social kind of contract we have, makes it less likely for kids to talk about people who are different from them. Or, we kind of create this us versus them mentality. And that increases the empathy gap. And it's really hard because a lot of times we stay with the people who are comfortable to us. But when we don't shy away from those conversations and we expose children to diversity, and diversity can mean anything. It doesn't just mean race or gender. It can mean any infinite amount of things, people who are different in any way from us. At a young age, we can hopefully try to increase their chances to not shut off, because it is uncomfortable, right? The child asks you why that kid is bald because they're in cancer treatment. That's kind of uncomfortable, right? As a parent, you may not know what to say, or you don't want the other child to feel uncomfortable or unsafe. But if we as adults can kind of acknowledge our own discomfort with certain things, whether it's somebody who is asking for money on the side of the road, or a family who isn't able to provide new clothes every year, whatever those things are, it's all different for everybody. The more we can try to break those down as adults, then our children will sense that and see it's okay to ask questions. It's coming from a place of curiosity and a place of understanding. And if we embrace those conversations rather than shy away in fear of those conversations, I think we as humans, whether you're adult, a child, whoever, can really see and understand that we are much more alike than we are different. And our empathy gap will hopefully start to shrink. And I know Jim and I have had so many conversations about the fears in our society around being wrong or politically incorrect or whatever it is. But I think the more you can be genuine and authentic with your attempts to connect and understand, then, the better it is. I truly believe that.
No, I think this is a huge point. And we sometimes as parents, again, we out of what we feel like is reasonable intention, we shut off avenues of empathy that we don't mean to. You gave a really good example. I was thinking about even my young kids, like, the age of 3 and 4, when they're starting to notice the difference in skin color. But Dad, so why is he black? Like what, like they're asking those questions. And in the moment, and you're hearing that question aired in the public space, as a parent, you're thinking, oh gosh, that's not, status quo of what should be asked. But unfortunately, if we squelch those questions in the moment, we're not intending to do this, but we are shutting off, again, the curiosity and the openness to a greater understanding of diversity or whatever out of our own anxiety. And I think that second key that we really should talk about with these 7 kind of advantages areas to increase empathy is, we have to tolerate some discomfort. If we're really going to increase empathy in our kids, then I know those are uncomfortable situations. And I know you hear your kids say something like, oh gosh, that is not what I wanted to hear in the grocery store. But again, like you said, it's coming out of a good place from our young, most of the time from our young kids. The question is, how are we going to allow that curiosity and promote the sense of empathy without, not tolerating discomfort like we need to? So.
And I think, all of these 7 areas are so interconnected, because the other piece is, being friendly and just showing that you are connecting to others. You don't have to be everybody's best friend. You shouldn't approach strangers in the grocery store and say hello to everybody, right? We know that there's some things that everything in moderation, including social skills, right? But at the same time, I mean, I'll be honest, like I think of myself being from a big city and someone in Evansville waves to me and I'm driving down the street and I'm like, I don't know you, don't wave to me. Like to me, I'm like, whoa, that's super standoffish. I'm like, hey, I don't know you like that. But I think that's just me, right? Like they're trying to be friendly. And I think that's my own defensive anxiety, what have you. But what's really key is when you model those friendly behaviors of just connecting through others with small acts, you'll see, again, this is contagious, right? When we kind of try to cultivate openness and authenticity and transparency, even with the smallest things like a smile when you're sitting next to someone at the dentist's office, right? Like you don't have to be all grim and grumpy and angry, or in the waiting room somewhere. But tuning into others and really kind of, again, this idea of unplugging and really being present with your kids, your spouse, whoever it may be, and engage with that we mentality that comes from being kind.
It's funny you brought up the story. I come from a family with a dad who could not have a conversation with anybody at some point, whether it was the gas station clerk or whatever. And to a fault, my dad was always starting conversations with everybody he saw. But I think as a young kid, what was fortunate about that for me was the sense that I recognized that my dad saw beyond the person's role that they were. Just because they were the clerk checking me out didn't mean that they didn't have their own life and their own interests and everything else like that. And I look back and think, yeah, it might have seemed a little odd to your point, but it definitely engendered in a sense like, hey, we should look at everyone as a human being with their own life and their own challenges and interests, and be willing to engage again when appropriate. And I was mentioning last week about running, I think it was last week, running with my son Noah and kind of dedicating our runs to someone who's maybe struggling more. But one of the other things I've done during these runs with my kids is to really try to say hello to people that we pass by, regardless of their situation, regardless of, this morning I was running with a friend down kind of in the more of the inner city area, and we were passing by a couple of people, just homeless in general. And I thought, you know what, it's great to see you. I mean, and I know that probably seems maybe a little weird, surprising. You talk to people you don't know, but I think with my kids, I want them to see that we really need to value at just a personal level. And little, like you said, little acts that we do kind of model that differently. You don't have to make it a big thing, but little things model that for all of our kids. So as an example that certainly can.
Yeah. You brought back something that I was thinking about earlier with this idea of saying hello to people who in some way look maybe that they're struggling or less fortunate. They potentially look like they don't currently, have certain things, they're asking for money, whatever it might be. I think for me, I get a sense of anxiety that I feel guilt. I feel guilty. That's the feeling. But one of the key foundational factors to all of this is emotional awareness, right? And as adults, we have that, hopefully, in a way that our kids don't yet have. But it's also okay to be transparent with your kids in that as well. Say, it makes me a little uncomfortable, or mom's a little scared because I'm not sure about the situation, but I acknowledge that. I'm doing healthy ways of managing my feelings, and I'm still going to engage in the appropriate, empathetic, positive behavior. So
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
think that's a
just
big
all about
key.
that piece. Yeah.
I think early in this series, we talked about the fact that to truly be as empathetic as possible, we also have to be as emotionally aware as possible. And I think there's a very direct correlation between those who are very, very aware of themselves and their own inclinations and emotional reactions to also those who can be very empathetic, right? It's almost in many ways, if you're very closed off to your own emotional state, it's hard to really understand another person's emotional state. I think that that's a definite big key there.
Right. And I will say, just in personal experience, I feel the same way as you. And I may not always have something to give tangibly, but even if somebody is walking by my window, I always smile at them because they do feel that at the end of the day, they're another person living their life, trying the best that they can. And some days my best is only 40%, but I give all 40%, and that's what I have. Right. So again, another big theme that we've kind of had throughout this is giving yourself grace, in that
Right.
you're not going to be perfect. You won't make everything out of every opportunity that comes throughout your day or week or month. But it's more about your mindset, and how, if this is what's present in your mindset as you're going through life, then it's just more opportunities to cultivate when you see it, right? And that's, again, this idea that it doesn't have to be some grand action where you donate $1 million and all of these things. It's just the little ways you make those changes in yourself and in your family, to allow those moments of meaningful connection to be there.
Yeah.
And another way that she talks about this is through this idea of unplugged games. Our technology can really be a great, wonderful thing, but it can also be a barrier for that human connection. And kids don't have great social skills anymore because so much of their interaction happens on a phone. Even on a FaceTime, it's not the same thing. And just playing games with kids, whether it's strategy games or make-believe games, any opportunity you can to make it fun for them to predict and think how someone else is thinking, is more opportunity for them to flex those muscles. You don't even have to say, this is an empathy building exercise, right? But I was reading the book and I was thinking of the game Sorry. This was a very popular game in my house as a kid. My younger brother loves this game. And, the big thing about Sorry is, as soon as somebody lands on you, sorry, you got to go back to the beginning, right? And there was always this battle of like, are you going to do it to my piece or mom's piece? And how frustrated I would get when he would do it to me, even though he should have done it to mom. And that's not fair. But even those moments, right, where you're being silly and having fun, is still an opportunity to say, like, okay, so how do you think she feels now that, you put her back in the sorry hole for the third time or whatever? Again, doesn't have to be anything crazy fancy or well thought out. Those genuine moments where kids are being kids, and you can just practice and reinforce those great skills.
I love the Sorry story. It reminds me, about a week ago, we were with friends on a trail. We've been doing kind of segment hiking, and we were over at the Giant City Lodge, and a couple of our friends were teaching us a new game, Farkle. I don't know if you've ever played Farkle, but it's
No, but it
interesting.
sounds interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's really more of a dice game, kind of rolling for different totals or whatever. Well, anyway, we were being taught the new game, which was neat. It's again an ability to kind of interface in that whole sector. And as we're going through, I repeatedly was just failing completely, and everybody thought, in some ways they thought it was funny, but in some ways, in part of as the game kept going on, everyone's like, "Oh, come on, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it." And so here I am with a bunch of kids and one other dad, my friend, and they're all like, "It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen," And so as you talk about increasing that empathy advantage, it was easier in an unplugged game and kind of the setting that we were in to probably allow for that to happen. And it was just a neat interaction overall. and not distracted by other things, that we could really focus on that time together. So I think that's a great idea that she has here.
Right. And even the competition, right? Of like,
Even the
ooh, who's going to
competitions.
get it first or who's going
Right.
to, make it around the board, whatever it is. Healthy competition, again, that's never the argument in this book that competition is bad. The argument is hyper competitiveness coupled with overpraising and really letting your child believe that they are the only person on the on planet Earth. That's where we start to see this selfie generation, right? Not so much that competition isn't there, because we can't say that either. It's everywhere, but we can make it healthy and fun in a way that doesn't breed kind of this anti-empathy. We can still feel for the person who didn't do as well as we did. One other thing I want to touch on is kind of an idea for how to encourage those conversation skills with your kids. Because like I said, I think more and more I see even teens not have great social skills who otherwise are typically developing. It's not a question of, a developmental disability, but more so these conversation skills and these friendly skills of like making eye contact and how do you show someone you're paying attention, more and more are changed because of the way our society communicates. So I think she comes up with this acronym SLANT, where you sit up, listen, ask questions, nod, and track the speaker with your eyes, which to me, I'm like, well, yeah, duh, that's how I show someone I'm paying attention. But more and more, we have kids looking down on their phone, or they're sitting like this, or they're looking around the room. And yes, we know some kids struggle with certain pieces and aspects of social communication. But if you can kind of teach your kids and look out for those behaviors, a great time to do that is in family meetings where we expect these things to happen. You look at the person who's talking, you ask questions, you show them you're paying attention. Those are awesome ways to increase those behaviors so that their bids to show friendly empathy behavior is actually received by the other person.
Yeah. No, I think these are great ideas. Just even kind of having a simple acronym like that can help kind of bring us back to, oh yeah, so those things really matter. And we talk about that in our groups here about just the simple movements, the simple ways that we show that we're engaged and create much more of a shared experience for sure.
And I think for parents to keep those things in mind too, because again, we are busy as adults. Like I don't ever see that changing, right? It'll only get more busy. So when you're talking to your kid, expecting them to do those things, are you also distracted by your phone? Or, are you doing 3 things at once? Or are you looking down at dinner while your kid's trying to tell you about their day? You're not engaging in those same skills that you expect from them. So they may not pick up on, oh, okay, when mom looks at me, that means she's listening, even though you are listening, right? That's what my younger brother would say. I am listening. No, you're not. You're not looking at me. Well, it's up for debate if he was actually listening, but those kinds of things, they matter for us as adults too. One thing I really liked, and I know we're shorter on time, I'm going to kind of breeze through some things, but she really encourages that as you work to incorporate these things into your life, like find support from other parents.
Mhm.
This starts at home. It starts with the people your kids see most, and especially in elementary school and preschool, you and the family is the primary socialization area for kids. As they get older, it changes. But it can be really hard and stressful to take this on and feel like you're the only person who wants this for your kid. But I don't think that's true. If we took a poll of parents in America and we asked, do you want your child to have all of the wonderful things we know that come from empathy? They would all say, yes, 100%. That's what I want for my kids. So finding places that you already interface with other parents, PTA, sports teams, religious organizations, finding ways to connect with parents on, hey, like this year on the baseball team, like let's do a cheer where instead of calling the other team silly, we build up our team, or let's encourage our children to, not worry about the trophy at the end of the season, or whatever those things are. As parents come together in groups, like you can have them to rely on when you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do in this situation, or this did not go as planned. What can we try?
Yeah, the real key here is, Jamie, it's so hard sometimes to go outside of your normal life and do extra kinds of things, even though, like we've said, you can do much of the empathy work within your everyday, just kind of ongoings. But I think that when parents rally around each other and they create these networks in any domain, they are so much more likely to sustain the things they want to sustain than doing it on their own island. And I mean, most of us as parents, if not all of us, would say, yes, I want my child to really be able to connect well with others and understand them well. And so if you kind of come up with ideas and you share that with even a small group of parents, it can just feel like that sense of solidarity kind of brings that home much easier.
Right. And I'm going to kind of combine these last two because I think they go very well together. But regardless of how old your kids are, or whether this is something you want to do for yourself or your employees or your coworkers, while we know that the key components of empathy can be started at a very young age when children are infants and we as parents respond to their needs appropriately, at the end of the day, it's a back and forth constantly where you are showing your child empathy for all of the things that are happening, and you expect that in return. It can allow for a stronger bond between parents and kids, but kids are more likely to engage in vulnerable, empathetic behavior when they feel that the environment is safe and trusting. So it's really important that regardless of where you're at and what you're planning to do, this starts with caring relationships. It starts with building meaningful relationships, because this is like a key basis of a lot of the therapies we do, is like the interaction between a parent and their child is such a strong predictor of your ability to engage well with your child, to discipline your child, to get your child to do what you need them to do, to be successful later on in life. And within the interconnectedness of the internet and FaceTime and all of these things, the more chances you have to cultivate a close relationship with your child or your employee or your students or whoever this is, the stronger that safe, trusting environment will be, and the more likely your child is to be engaging in those behaviors like empathy and courage. So I just encourage you to not give up, to say, even when it's a hard day, even when it failed or you feel like you missed it, right? It's about the connection and the relationship. And from there, so many beautiful things can happen.
Well said. No, it's really, really, really beautiful. And I think the way I think about this is that for all of the intentional, explicit things that we do to create, greater empathy or to create, many things in our kids, I would argue that it's the implicit connections and the implicit, representation of who we are that probably has the biggest impact, right? So there's many things that we can say to do, or we can organize them to, and kind of help on the outside to set up. But the person who you are and the connection that you have with them, I think in the long term probably is the biggest agent of change in general. And so with that, we're going to say goodbye. We have one more edition left next week, kind of a surprise way, hopefully, for you to remember the keys to empathy as we go forward. But thanks so much for joining us once again. And it's been a lot of fun being part of this series with you.
Yep. See you guys next week.
Have a great day.